Hey everyone, my name is Harris Eddie Hill. I'm a they them, and I founded the Centre for Childhood Trauma Healing, and I specialise in actually treating um, complex PTSD, like relational trauma, particularly. So think if other people have kind of messed us up, or we've been exposed to kind of unhealthy patterns for a long time, it might not even be that major. But in order to recover from it, we're going to talk a little bit about that today, among other things, and um, and about how we actually go about changing that, because so much of the conversation up until now has been around talking therapy, which is great. I think talking therapy can be really incredible, but it's not always clear about what talking therapy can do for you and what it can't do for you. And the trauma industry that I'm in is slightly different. So obviously there's a lot of support, but the whole point is that we would hopefully get to a point where we don't have trauma anymore, rather than just being really good at living with it. I'm going to do a screen share. Sorry, bear with me. I've not used Canva for a while. I'll be right with you. Okay. So, gotta find the present button now. My apologies. It's been a right technical thing today, and I'm not normally bad with technology. There we go. I found it. Sorry, the Zoom was hiding it. So, welcome to today's online workshop. Are you ready for the best relationships of your life? Escape the toxic relationship cycle and find your dream relationship blueprint. So, as I said, I'm Harris. I used to work in the NHS as a health and well-being coach, which was basically like supporting people with anything that they wanted support with. I worked out of GP surgeries on the other side of London, so I would commute twice a week, 2 hours each way, because I really loved that work and I loved the job. But what I came to see was that the majority of the reason that people were struggling with, their relationship with food, or with their managing their health, or being really stressed and anxious, it always came down to relationships, either present ones or past ones. And I was like, this has to change. And having been in the NHS and seeing the things that we could refer people onto, the different services, it was so lacking. And I think it's that way in a lot of places. There are little bits of help now, depending on your postcode in the UK. I don't know how it is in other countries. It can be way more difficult to access that help in other countries. And even then, a lot of the time, the only thing that is recommended for helping you is just things like EMDR, which is one modality, but it's not as holistic. And I wanted to create something that addressed all of the different facets. It's not just about overcoming past things, but it's also about how you build the new, and how expertly you're guided through that, because actually a lot of people don't study that kind of thing. Or if they do, it's one particular aspect. So you might see uh, people talk, they might have specialized in attachment theory, which is really important, but it's only one of several parts. And we're going to talk about that a bit today. Just for reference, I have trained and qualified as a NLP practitioner, timeline therapist, trauma practitioner, and healthy relationship coach. I'm the founder of the Centre for Childhood Trauma Healing, and I've survived and actually overcome PTSD and complex PTSD. I don't meet the criteria anymore. So this is not just my work. This has also been my story, not to center myself, because today is really about you, but to really drive home that this is not just my job. This has also been my experience. Like, I know the ins and outs of it, and it's been my special subject to really get to the bottom of all of these issues and how we can actually change it, because I'm fairly obsessed. So I want to really bring this expertise to you today so that you can change your relationship luck. So you can either put this in the comments or you can just write it down. But I really encourage you to put this into words somewhere. I want you to ask yourself, what has been your pattern so far? So just big picture. So is it that I'm always in relationships or I'm in relationships long term, but they're never super healthy, or my needs aren't met, or it's very one-sided, like my cup is frequently empty and I'm constantly pouring into other people. Maybe your pattern is avoiding romantic relationships, or you sort of might dabble with them a little bit, and then once it becomes a little bit too close, or there's even something difficult, or someone your partner or whoever you're dating is maybe trying to talk to you and it just all feels too much and you're like, no, this is too much like stress and I'm out. Maybe you've had a lot of experiences of kind of wanting to be in relationships but just finding them really hard, like it's like a massive emotional roller coaster. Maybe maybe it's sort of like this feeling of I want this and also it stresses me out. So it's sort of, I want to be in this relationship, I want it to work out, and at the same time it's just I feel so, not even just insecure, I just feel really like I'm constantly waiting for the other shoe to drop. I'm constantly waiting for this to not work out. Maybe it's a mixture of all of those. Maybe you've had some good experiences peppered among the ones that weren't so good. And I want to be clear, I'm not talking about today, we're not measuring success by finding your happily ever after like a Disney movie and then um like growing old together and then like dying together when you're 90. We're thinking about relationships as like a overall a positive experience. So um something that started well and overall went well, and even when it ended there was still a lot of respect, there was no big blow up, it was quite harmonious. So we can still count that as a successful relationship, because it's not, especially in this day and age. I mean, even in Victorian times, just to geek out for a second, the average life expectancy was about 40. Obviously that wasn't the case for everybody, and a lot of that number was driven down by infant mortality. But it was uncommon to kind of have lived as many lives as we do now. And even in our era today, it's normal to have multiple jobs. It's normal to live a lot longer. It's normal to have many more phases of life than we used to, and to have more options. We've got access to education in a way that we didn't used to, healthcare, depending on your country. Life has changed now. So I think to measure the success of your relationships purely based on its longevity, how long you're with somebody, and the earliest that you can meet them and the longest that you can be with them, it just doesn't make any sense to do it that way. So I want to also invite you with this question, what has been your pattern so far? I want you to, if you have had some positive experiences, they might have been short, but overall might have been totally fine. I want you to count those in the pattern. So really have a think about that and write it down. And now I want you to ask yourself, what do you want instead? Now, the answer should not be like George Clooney or Timothy Chalamet or Chappell Roan. We're not talking about specific people. We're talking about, what pattern do you want instead? Do I want to feel secure with a partner? Do I want to feel worthy? of the love that I want at all times? Do I want to really feel like I'm a catch? And do I want to meet people who similarly are, to me, are interested in personal growth, who take accountability for their mental health and their kind of development of addressing the things that they need to address in order to be an effective adult. Um, the qualities, we're thinking about qualities. What are the qualities that I would want in myself and the other person? And what is my ultimate goal? It may be marriage and kids in the traditional sense. It might not be those things. If you're polyamorous, then you might think, well, I'd really like to be, have a few really lovely relationships and to live on my own, or it could be anything. So just really think about what do you want instead and be really real. Don't talk yourself out of the answer. Just answer completely honestly, like, and give yourself permission to want what you want. So really, really think about that. And again, this can't be tied to a specific person. Okay. And we're going to get onto that in a bit. What you want in a relationship can't be tied to a specific person because that's when we get in trouble. The Buddhists talk a lot about non-attachment, and I guess some of what we're going to talk today is a little bit about that. And if you have big feelings about that, that's totally valid. Note it down, and we can talk about it late in a little while. We've just had a delayed attendee, so hi, Patricia. Um, we just started, so you might have a moment to catch up. And so the last question, what have you tried already to change your pattern? Maybe you've tried to date differently. Maybe you've done loads of therapy already. Maybe you've read loads of books or have an audiobook addiction like I do. Maybe after certain relationships, you've said, I will never date a football fan ever again. I actually have said that once. Maybe you've thought, I want to, maybe you went through a very specific thing and you thought, I don't want to date someone who's kind of like that again. Maybe it was a specific trait or a specific life experience or something. Um, I had a moment when I was younger where I had dated when I was a lot younger, and I dated somebody who was about 12 years older than me. I was an adult, it's fine. And he was divorced and had two children that he didn't see, and he could have seen them, but he didn't for various reasons that I won't go into. But for me, off the back of that, I realized that actually I want to be involved with somebody who is as involved with their family as they can be, or as is healthy. I would never judge anyone for not having contact with family, or that being limited for out of necessity. Um, or maybe if they don't have family, maybe they've got loads of really close friends. But I realized that I really want someone who already does healthy relationships and already knows how to do emotional intimacy and is available for the other people in their life. That's become one thing I've always looked for. So I want you to note, like, really be really positive about all the things that you've tried already. Okay, just going to open the chat and just check to see if there are any questions. Oh, I've lost it. Sorry, the box has disappeared. Bear with me. Oh, there any questions at this point? Shall I keep going? Are you ready? Gathering. Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Okay. Okay, I'm assuming you can still see the screen share because the little box that was at the side has disappeared. Very strange. Oh, I made it appear again. I'm so sorry. This is such a technical, strange day, which is not normal for me. Brilliant. Thanks, Michelle. Okay. So I want to take you through a few of these things. I want to preface all of this with the fact that I really value non-judgment. So none of this is to judge. This is just to give you information. And I only know this because I've been exactly the same. I'm going to take you through a few things that you need to know. So there may be some of us who've just been unlucky in love, but it hasn't been massively dramatic. Okay. So the very first thing that we're going to talk about here might not apply to you, and that's okay. You're still in the right space, but we're just coming from the extreme end, and then we're going to work our way through. So the very first thing is why concentrating on becoming an armchair expert in mental health disorders is keeping you stuck. So that's not to, don't worry, I'm not saying that you shouldn't know about it or care about it or be informed. In the last 10 years, there's been a real rise in people talking about things like narcissistic personality disorder, antisocial personality disorder, all these various things. And depending on who you ask, some people say it's about 1% of the population, and other people say it's up to 20%, depending on where you are. I think it's Dr. Rama, I think that's her name. Excuse me if I've got it wrong, but she thinks that in certain places and in certain industries even it's as many as 1 in 5. I don't know if I've ever experienced such a high concentration of people sort of in that category. But it's it's more, it's more than a needle in a haystack. I've definitely met my fair share of folks who would fit those descriptions. And usually, if we're really invested in that kind of thing, it's because we have been through something that was so messy and roller coastery and really messed with our heads to the point that it's become really an important part of our process to be able to have the language to speak about it, to identify it, and to kind of have that added protection so that we're informed and therefore we might know what we're looking for when we're dating or meeting new people in the future. So there's nothing inherently wrong with that, I don't think, but that's not really where the magic happens, and I'll tell you why. One of the parts of the healthy framework, which we'll get to on the penultimate slide after this one, is we start talking about codependency. Codependency gets thrown around to mean so many different things. And a lot of people think, well, I'm not codependent because I'm really independent, and that is a sign of codependency. um, so there are a lot of theories. You'll see a lot of sort of pop culture, pop psychology type stuff talking about how ADHD people and narcissists go together, or empaths and narcissists go together. But the thing that is actually more clinically correct is that it's codependency that goes together with narcissism. Um, Codependency is a trauma survival mechanism. And we can develop this in really nice families. This is not in any way, nothing I say today is to kind of be unkind or critical of anybody's family or anything like that. These can literally just be patterns that we've grown up learning. And we might have had the most lovely parents and family in the world. And it may be that our parents were lovely, but they learnt to do codependency from their parents or and so on. So codependency is a trauma sort of survival mechanism which says, I need to appease, I need to kind of mollify and kind of emotionally soothe the people in my house, in my environment. Otherwise, they'll kick off. They might abandon me. They might harm me, even just emotionally. There's risk involved. And it's actually a really effective trauma mechanism and a survival mechanism that kind of gets you through those really difficult times. If you've grown up in a family where there's a lot of emotional upheaval and maybe some emotionally unstable parents, or maybe you're from, maybe it was you had a single parent who had to work two jobs and wasn't there very much, so you took on this caretaker role, um, even even if there was no abuse and nothing awful, maybe you were just the eldest in the situation and you had to take on that role for the sake of the family's survival. Okay, so it's a mechanism that we develop to either help ourselves survive or to help our family survive, or both. And it's very much focused on, and there is a healthy version of this. This isn't to say that if we're healthy, we're selfish. Okay. The thing with codependency is that it's not balanced. It's not balanced between me and you. So as an example, if this is a really basic example, just to give you a picture. If you've got £5, $5, euros, whatever left in your purse or your wallet, um, that's all you've got left, and someone comes up to you, like somebody you love usually, and it's like, oh, I'm so screwed, like, I can't even afford a bag of pasta. And you go, okay, take my fiver. It's at your expense. And we're not saying that we don't give to people, but when you've got nothing left and they've got nothing left, and then it's very much a self-sacrifice. Whereas a codependent thing, sorry, a interdependent healthy thing might be, well, I've got enough to batch cook a meal, so why don't you come over for dinner? I will make it and you can take half of it home. And then that way you've both got more than enough, right? So it sounds subtle, but it's a really palpable difference. And people feel that in you, the way that you approach your relationships and your problem solving. And it's going to be really, really present in those moments and in that way. So to come back to the question, as long as we are in this sort of codependent loop and that's how we're thinking, we're sort of people pleasing, we're not saying no, we're not being honest, we're putting up with things too long. So I have met, just to kind of finish on this, I have met some people who don't think they're codependent because they constantly verbally tell people, oh, well, I don't like that, or I don't want you to do that. But then there's no consequence. It's not a boundary without a consequence that you're willing to and able to follow through on. So as long as we're in that loop, we are, even though it's not healthy, we are most compatible with people who are extremely egocentric and are basically take when we're give. And it's only from changing that the landscape of the people around you and the people that you attract and maybe even start relationships with will begin to change. So relationship patterns that are keeping you stuck, and why, despite your commitment to making better choices. So you might be able to begin to get the idea at this point. There are patterns going on in your brain, and those are formed from literally when you're born. So some of us are victims of the era where the Ferberizing method was used, which was the idea that we let crying babies cry out on their own. The Dr. Ferber, who had suggested that, he had suggested it to a much older child, to a family who had a much older child who had this sort of issue, and was actually horrified that this was used to as the way to, like, recommended way to treat crying babies, because it's actually extremely traumatizing to the brain. And so that particular method, if the parent does come to you as the baby often enough, then you get, that's often one of the things that will begin something called an anxious attachment. An anxious attachment is like, you will come sometimes, but I don't trust that you're actually there for me all the time. So the baby's cry is switched on all the time, or is very heightened. Like the moment anything's wrong, they'll cry immediately because they can't risk losing that connection repeatedly. Babies who get left way too much will end up often being avoidant. So they've learned that, well, actually, it doesn't matter if I cry, like I'm on my own in the world. So they will often avoid things a lot. And then you've got the disorganized babies who, they do have attachment, but their caregiver is also a big risk to them in some way. So all of these patterns absolutely can be changed, and we're going to get on to how that happens. So in adulthood, this looks like anxiously checking your phone. It might look like avoiding hard discussions or avoiding dating and emotional intimacy altogether. It might look like craving emotional intimacy, but just feeling so unsafe when you're in it. It doesn't, like, you want it, and part of you maybe does enjoy it, but it just feels unsafe at the same time. Sorry, I've just had a, Michelle says, man, I'm totally done for. I give away cash to my detriment a lot, and I was in an incubator for a few months without my mum. Michelle, it could do it. I mean, to be fair, if you're in an incubator, around that age, you sleep a lot anyway. If you're premature, then you sleep a lot. And also, if you've got nurses, and if you do cry and there are nurses and there are people around to kind of tend to you, then that might not happen. It is totally dependent on the level of care that you've got, which I expect that you don't remember. But um, yeah, those things like that can be challenging. So other relationship patterns we're going to get to on the next thing, and um, I will give you a little bit of ideas of different things so you can start to note it down, and we can start to come up with a plan, which is the last point on this slide. So how to feel confident you'll never get stuck with another dysfunctional a-hole ever again. Once you've addressed all of this stuff, there also has to be this element, and this is the one part of intention that I talk about. The rest of it, I don't care how hard you try, it's not your fault, because there's so many years of programming that just can't be overcome with your intention to date better people. Not usually. Occasionally it does happen that way, but a lot of the time I don't expect that you would be here if you had managed it through your intentions alone. And I don't think for a second that anybody in this room hasn't tried really hard, actually. So aside from the actual kind of changing in your brain, the confidence here is to really know 100% in yourself that will you will give a new connection a healthy amount of openness and willingness to try to communicate, to stay in it, and that when it's not working and you've tried those things, that you will bow out and you will choose yourself. It's not the same as a cut and run. So a lot of us, and my past self included, will do a cut and run. So this looks like, it's going okay, it's going okay. They do one thing that doesn't seem right, or that's just a bit triggering, and we're like, no, I'm out. They're a dick. It's all their fault. And there's just this very sort of final, like, those breakups often look like blocking people, ghosting people, criticizing them a lot when they're not around. And it's not the same as, I was really hurt by that. Like, I feel really sad. That's not the same. And it's not to say you can't be angry about it, but it sounds very different. Okay. Um, there's a real difference between breaking up in a healthy way, even if the other person is in the wrong. And again, this is not to say that you're doing it wrong, or that you should be ashamed, or that like you failed in breaking up well. This is more about how it feels to you. It's sad when a connection ends, for one reason or another, even if it's right and you know it's right. But to add this sort of trauma, sort of really stressy, dramatic layer on top, makes it even harder to kind of sit through, and it's much more difficult. So this is really all about you and how you handle it and how it feels in your body. Because I can tell you, going through a breakup that's healthy is so much gentler on the body. Like, there's still sadness and there's still grief about things, but it's not filled with criticism of them or of yourself, or there might be some accountability, but it's far less violent on the body. um so there's just a really different intention, and a lot of our lack of confidence, and this was really hard for me to take, so I say this like so lovingly to you. One of the hardest things I realized was that I was anxious about dating people, new people, because I didn't trust that I wouldn't get swept up in it and get myself out in time. So many of us will self-abandon because, oh, it's not the right time, or they're not going to take it very well, or they just got a new job. um, we can avoid things at our expense over and over again. And a lot of our lack of confidence about this comes from that space of, I'm not 100% sure I will show up for myself, even when it's hard. If we have disorganized attachment, that might look like picking a fight rather than just saying it. So there's just a lot of dysfunction there, and those sorts of practices, even if we break up with those people, um, and sort of all done in the past, it's not, even for ourselves, just thinking totally from a sort of self-centered point of view, it's not good for our brains. We don't want to practice the dysfunction and the drama over and over again. And again, I'm not saying that judgmentally at all, but how it feels to your nervous system, we don't want to do that over and over again. So even if we're going to date and break up with somebody again, it's better for us, for our health, and for our sense of sort of self pride, I guess, or self-worth, to think, well, I handled that really well, even though I'm sad. It's a very different experience. um I'm going to swap those around a second. So I'm going with the penultimate one. Why your resistance to advocating for and receiving the help you need prevents your connection to the right people. So we're talking about really not accepting help and support, and why that's a massive issue. If you think back to the beginning, we talked about codependency, beginning of this slide, we talked about codependency. If all you do is give, 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 the people who are going to love that about you are all the people who are going to take, take, take. And there is a scale, there is a sliding scale. You might have dated someone who was all right, but they were a bit self-involved and just not massively available. So that is one thing that can happen. You can stop dating like the people at the sort of extreme end of the scale, and then you kind of come in a little bit, and then you've got people who are, they're not awful, but they're just not very available, or they really struggle to be in relationships, even though they seem quite nice. So that's a really common one, as we kind of go along and maybe incrementally make better decisions. A relationally healthy person, even your friend or anybody that's close to you, they do not, if it's healthy and they're healthy and they want the best for you and they really, really love you, even whether you're giving them stuff or not giving them stuff, they actually don't want stuff from you in that way. On a special occasion, maybe they're moving house, maybe they've just had a kid and they just need you, they need you to pop over and look after the baby for 10 minutes while they have a shower and go to the toilet in peace. um Helping people is normal, but when that is how you exist day in and day out, to think about, oh, what do all of these people need, and oh, I hope that person's not annoyed with me, and to be treading on eggshells and or just avoiding all of this stuff over a long period of time, it's it's really preventing you from the healthy love with the people who can actually meet you in that healthy space. I'll give you a short example. So I very much, I not, when we talk about attachment, so earlier we talked about anxious and avoidant and disorganized attachment and how those different things felt. There's also secure attachment, which is kind of where we want to get to, uh, unless we just love the drama too much. Um, Most people are a mixture of all of those. The very first time I started looking at attachment, I was about a quarter of all of them, which was really interesting, but not unusual. But the thing that came out of me the most was the anxious. So when I was younger, it'd be like, oh, they haven't texted me back. Maybe it's something that I said. I would people please a lot. I would always say yes. Like the idea of saying no made me feel a bit like I was going to throw up. And it was just all about other people. If other people around me were stressed, it became my mission and my sense of self to kind of address their problems and to help them. And it just felt stressful all the time. Um, so the anxious part was the bit that came out the most, where I would be probably a bit overbearing, and it maybe even come across as kind of like controlling, but like in a smothering way, like in a almost, I guess, like a maternal, like smothering way. And that's how it would come across. And some years after I started to date healthy people and be in a much better space, like years afterwards, I dated someone when I was traveling in Australia, and very quickly it became obvious this was an anxious person, and also like there was a lot of overbearing behavior. And I'm not saying this to criticize, but just purely as an experience, it was so humbling. I was like, wow, this is what I used to be like, and to experience it from the other end was so interesting. And I wanted to know that person. I wanted to know what they liked. I wanted to hear them say no occasionally. I almost wanted to like feel their boundaries of, actually, no, I don't want to do that, or I don't like that food, or whatever it might be. And I just never found it. It felt like, on the one hand, it felt like I had a child, like they had this very childlike quality of kind of needing me like a lot. And we all do need things, and that's not anyone's fault. Like if we are that way, it's because we didn't get what we needed when we were younger, and we haven't been able to move on yet. And there was that real neediness, but then at the same time, I felt like they were my fan rather than my equal. And I kept encouraging them, like, oh, well, what do you think about that? And they'd be like, yeah, it's great. And there was so much people pleasing, and we tried to talk about it, and eventually it just didn't work out. We couldn't really get anywhere. And I so wanted for that person to have that sense of self and say no and take up space. It actually ended up being a total hindrance to our relationship progressing beyond, a short time, because healthy relationships is where two people actually get to show up imperfectly, but to really show up and take up their space and to be themselves and to really co-create that space together, rather than one kind of people pleasing and just making space for the other person all the time, right? So when we're really codependent in that way, when we don't receive help or love and support, and we don't do that as easily as we do it when we offer it, that puts off healthy people. If we're a bit bad at it, but it's not, we can do it some of the time, then we have got a far better chance. You don't have to be perfect at this, but if we live our entire lives sort of isolated and self-reliant, a healthy person is not going to be like, that's the one for me. Unfortunately, not at this point anyway. It just doesn't feel good. Like a healthy pattern, a healthy relationship feels like you both take up plenty of space. So we're just going to get on to the next slide, which is kind of near the end. So I'm not going to keep you for loads longer, but I'm just going to check the chat. If there are any questions, then please ping it across in the chat, or you're welcome to unmute at any point. I'm going to go on to the last slide, or penultimate one. So your healthy relationship framework. There's one extra thing I think I meant to write here. I think that's fine. So healthy relationship framework. And these are the patterns I want you to think about. So I want you to write down for each one of these four, if you relate to any of it. So firstly, we've talked a bit about codependency and how when we're very others orientated, we're always thinking about others, we're always putting ourselves last, we're always, sort of that people pleasing energy. If that's an issue for you, or you see some of that in you, there is a scale. So you might be good at some parts of this and not, and sort of need to address some other bits. So if any of that rings true for you, that's part of, you can kind of stick a pin in that and say, yep, that's part of what I need to address. The second thing is healthy vulnerability. If we don't want to cry in front of anybody else, if we don't share with people when we're struggling, if we don't accept help, and if in a tough moment we pick a fight instead of saying how we feel, that's another one. There's a lot of honesty in this. And by the way, vulnerability, healthy vulnerability is not something you do with everyone. If you've got a really problematic colleague at work, or you've got a frenemy, those are not the people you're going to be vulnerable with. It's probably not appropriate. It doesn't necessarily mean you keep all cards to your chest and you never say anything to them, but it's something you have to be measured about. So if you're not doing healthy vulnerability with anybody, and like the real deep stuff, I'm not necessarily suggesting that part of vulnerability means that we trauma dump on all of our friends or our partners, or we tell them all the terrible things that have happened. But we might have shared that, as just sort of the big picture of, well, my home growing up was like this or like that. Just something brief, or like, oh, I didn't really have a very good time at that point in my life. And if someone asks you, you might slightly embellished. We're not talking about necessarily that your friends have taken an entire mental health and relationship history and trauma history from you, but it's at least enough that someone really feels that they know you and they know why you are the way that you are and understands where you're coming from because of what you've shared. You've given them context. They know things about you from before they met you, and they know you more deeply than going out clubbing or to the pub, or it's not shallow. The third one is about uh really, this is about emotional maturity, although I sometimes think that sounds a bit judgmental. If we don't have emotionally immature parents, or if we don't have emotionally mature parents and that hasn't been modeled to us, then we might just not be very good at it, and that's okay. Like, our heart might be absolutely in the right place. We might be really emotionally available for our loved ones, our friends, our family, but we likely have picked up some things along the way. I know that I did. I grew up in a family where someone apologizing was basically like them punching you in the face. It was not the done thing. So one of the things I had to learn as I grew up and I intentionally matured and developed myself was that I had to get used to accountability, and apologizing as something that builds connection is actually really beautiful, rather than it being like a judgment or a criticism, or that you're basically admitting that you're a piece of crap. Um, and it's such having that in a healthy relationship is like just incredible. Like, it's so beautiful. It creates such deep um love and respect and all of those things. That's often where the real magical stuff happens. And a lot of that includes boundaries as well. And again, boundaries isn't just telling people I don't want you to do that, it's actually following through on a consequence as well at the end. And then the last bit, which is the most important bit in my mind, um, I feel anyway, because the other things are habits. Okay. So the first three things we've talked about are habits. And this last one is not about a habit. So things are changing, but typically when we talk about emotional or mental challenges, or when we need help in that area, we generally think about talking therapy. And that is a brilliant, brilliant place to start. If you find the right talking therapist to kind of begin your work, it can be genuinely really life-changing. But what traditional talking therapy doesn't do is that it doesn't actually deeply, it doesn't treat relational trauma or any of those really deep-seated patterns that we've talked about today. Very difficult to change those things when you've got these other programs running. And I really want to stress to you that the programs that are running, all of the things that we've talked about, they're so important. They're so important. They are for human beings and for sort of even social animals, even dogs and, apes and stuff. Um, Even cows have best friends. um, but all of this stuff is not, it's not this sort of luxury thing that we have if we're really lucky, we meet people that we want to settle down with. All of the things that we've talked about today, all of the programming exists in us as these sort of sentient, social, emotional beings to actually help us all to survive, and not just infancy. Obviously, we need that attachment, we need relationships in order to survive infancy, because when we're born, we can't do anything. um, you know, we're these sort of lovely little potatoes. So you, this is not just some, like, this is such a genuine need. This is so important. And, you know, as adults, if our ancestors didn't have this kind of social relationship with all of the other people in our group, we wouldn't have survived. When big predators come along, us on our own, we're screwed, but us in a group, we probably win, right? So this is going back to literally the human condition, but also how we survive. Nowadays, we don't have to deal with sort of other animals trying to eat us so much. And, you know, a lot of us live in societies where we have supermarkets, so we're not hunting for food. You know, things have become in some ways much easier to survive now. We've got like healthcare and all of that stuff. But when our relationship patterns are not ideal, and I think in our society they're more likely to be a bit damaged just because of how we live. We don't live naturally in the way that we sort of had done for thousands of years. I think we're more likely to need this more than ever. Um, and we're more likely to suffer with these issues. Um, you know, if you think about a sort of a more natural community, you know, if one of your parents had died, you've got like 20 aunts and uncles. Like it might not be exactly the same, but you definitely have that level of input and love and support. Whereas the way that we live now, it's very much a one or two adult home and family most of the time. And so if the one or two you've got are a bit dodgy, or they're struggling too, um, the same amount of input that you would get from a broader community that are more close knit, you just don't get it. So I think that's one of the reasons we have such a hard time with this. Anyway, but the way that we actually change this is not by talking about it. As I said, talking about it is a good place to start. But the way that we actually begin to change these patterns is to actually give your brain an emotional experience that actually helps to begin changing those patterns. And this can happen really quickly. So, as an example, if we've been taught to be afraid of anger, because to us, anger only means violence, which is not true. They're two totally different things. But if in our experience, that's the only way that it's been modeled to us, we're going to be terrified of anger. When it comes up in us, we're going to be highly uncomfortable, not know how to sit with it. When it comes up in other people, even in a healthy way, we're going to be triggered, right? Um, and we can't convince ourselves out of that because the part of us that formed to protect us against that anger is still running its program. So in the work that I do and in the trauma industry in general, there are lots of different modalities, and I won't go through all of them, but I just want to give you a really broad, singular example. Oh, um, just checking the chat. Um, I want you to imagine for a moment that let's pick a really random example so that you can really sit with this. I want you to imagine that as a child, your house, your garden, and half of your house got squashed by a big green elephant. Okay. Luckily, nobody was killed, but it's ever since you've had an absolutely horrific fear of green elephants. And even now, as an adult, you've got a habit of looking out of the windows and squinting in the distance. Maybe you've even bought some binoculars because you're looking for more green elephants, even though it only happened once. If I tell you statistically, it's mental that you even saw one green elephant, the likelihood of you seeing another one, I can pretty much guarantee you it will never happen. You might hear that logically, but you're not going to feel it in your body. If the trauma response is still active, it's there to keep you alive. It doesn't care what I'm saying. However, trauma is an unprocessed thing. So if we've got complex trauma because we've lived with parents or in families or upbringings that were just really tough day in, day out, or really regularly there was sort of issues with alcohol or shouting or whatever it might be. The part of us that formed to protect us at that time, which is a trauma mechanism, the trauma mechanism is literally there to keep you alive. That part of you actually doesn't know that you're no longer in that situation. That part also hasn't been felt safe enough to express because it doesn't know that the danger is over. It doesn't know that you're not 5 anymore. It doesn't know that you don't live with your parents anymore. So to actually go to that part and that part of you that trauma response, whatever we're calling it, and to give that part a chance to express itself and to let it know that actually, you know, I'm 63 now, or whatever it might be, and this is my home, and we actually haven't lived with mum and dad for 40 something years, and it's absolutely incredible in my work when I do this with people and they say, and that the part of them that is hearing this says, oh, because often if you ask that part, and it's one of my favorite parts of my job, you ask that part, how old are we? They often say things like, oh, well, we're 8, or we're 11, or we're 5. So to connect to those parts of us emotionally and actually be able to allow that part of us to know that the danger is over. And I'm simplifying it, it's a little bit more technical than this. And it takes an expert touch, but it actually allows your brain to move on, to allow the body to actually kind of retire those trauma responses. So this would look like, once it's gone, this looks like you just react to things in a really, like, really regulated way. Even if you're annoyed or something, it's not, it comes from such a different place. And I can't explain to you what a relief and how different and how much more peaceful it is to come from that space. It's so, so different. So I have come to this firstly as a client. My PTSD was treated in 2 sessions, and my complex PTSD, I'm still go back to somebody occasionally if I find a little piece here and there, but it's been relatively short. And with the example that I've just used then, so like with the green elephant, we might go back to the 5-year-old to say, how did you feel about the green elephant? What happened with the incident with the green elephant? What did it make you believe about the world and about your safety? And we really process all of that stuff. And once it's been said and felt, most importantly, and no, we're not talking about green elephants here. We're really talking to that version of you who went through the thing, and just to allow that version of you to really release everything, to say everything, to know where you are right now, and that actually their job is finished, is incredibly, incredibly powerful. It's not the same as talking therapy, and I really hope you can see the difference there. So I just want to tell you at the end of our workshop today about an offer, something that I'm starting next week. And as you've made it to the end, I wonder if you are interested in this. But before that, I just want to ask you, I've got the chat open, if there's anything that you want to ask, anything that you want to share? Is this ringing a bell? Do you feel like, yes, I think like I really relate to this, or have you got a slightly different story and you want clarification on it? Just type it in the chat, or you're very welcome to switch your microphone on, or whatever you want to do. You've got me here, so use me and my brain. I invite you to. I appreciate we've shared a lot of information in this, and your brain might even feel a bit melty, but if so, well done. Not seeing anything in the chat, so I'm going to go on to the last slide. And if you have a question, please do type it anyway, and I will hold space for a Q&A at the end. So if this has all rung a bell with you, and you're like, yeah, I have all of these issues, I would really love to invite you into a space where we can actually begin to do this work. And to really begin changing this view. You can't change this sort of thing overnight, not usually. I've heard of some people, they go off to do ayahuasca or something, and they come back and they're like, oh, everything's cool now. But if you're like me, you may not be massively interested in ayahuasca. So instead of that, I have created a membership, and one of my members from the year just gone is here today, but I won't out to you unless you want to share. And this is a space where we have mutual support. There's going to be group coaching, so I can coach you through your challenges or different things that have come up. You've got an entire library from the last year of an entire sort of complex trauma, healthy relationships. There's even a bit about money in there. There's some somatics classes, and there will be more somatics classes this year, which is sort of like it's like a body connection type thing. It's really, really good for folks who, have some levels of trauma or relationship kind of history that's not super positive. There's an entire body of work there. We take you through, like the library that's already there. We take you through things like emotional regulation and getting really good at that. If we don't come from super healthy backgrounds, there are often bits of our emotional education that are missing. So there's a practice in there at the beginning. It's just, I mean, so much of the feedback I've had on that has been like people's scores of how comfortable they are and how confident they are with their emotions it changes really, really quickly. We've got other parts in there about challenging your beliefs. We've got other parts in there about actually beginning to visualize and actually start to engage with the healing process through I guess kind of like guided visualizations or meditations. And we've also got something in there called future building, which is all about sort of what do you want your future to look like, and really getting into that space of what you want. So that's all of the library that's already there that you can access like straight away if you wanted to come and join us in the membership. And then also there'll be regular coaching, regular classes. I'm even thinking about running some online retreats, and this is all included. You'll make friends in there, and it's fairly low key. I'm not going to bombard you with, you've got to do so many hours in a week. You might just do 1 hour a week on the weeks that we don't have our call, and then on the weeks we have our call, just come and hang out. This is not a really big thing, but if this is something that you want to change for yourself, I'm really, really inviting you to actually make this the year that you get out of that cycle and create a new one. And I'd be thrilled to help you to do it. I've come such a long way. My clients have come such a long way. And I just really love this work, and I know what it is to kind of be unfulfilled and to feel isolated and uncared for and unloved, and like you're there for other people, or and nobody's really there for you. It absolutely sucks. Like it really sucks. And to be on the other side of that, where you've got loads of support and lots of, you feel very loved, you've got people really present for you. It's it just really makes life worth living in a way that nothing else does. Our connection to other people is, it's the number one predicator on life satisfaction, whether you're, physically ill or healthy, whether you're, regardless of your age or anything else. Like having healthy deep connection with enough people for you is absolutely essential if you're going to enjoy your life and get the most out of it. So, to try it out and to make it a no-brainer for you, I'm offering this for £39 for your first month if you just wanted to sign up, just for the membership, just as a subscription. And I've got other two other offers on there as well. If you wanted to actually do some one-to-one work, I also have space for 3 one-to-one. If you wanted to do private and you actually don't want to do the membership and you'd rather just like really go for it and throw the kitchen sink at it, I do have spaces for one-to-one clients. It is an investment, but there are payment plans. The point of a lot of the work that I do with people is that you won't need this again. The idea with actually treating this stuff is that there is no going back. It's not a habit that you have to try to stay in. This is something that is just going to happen to your brain, with your consent, of course, and with your participation. But the idea is that we just get you to the point where your internal relationship blueprint is just so natural and so easy that you don't even really have to think about it anymore. It's only when I do workshops like this that I actually have to think about it, and I remember a lot of the things from before, but the rest of the time it's just it was my old life, and that's not how I exist anymore. And that's really what I want for you and other people, and all of the wonderful people that I work with. So you can cancel this membership anytime if it's not for you. I'm going to put the link in. I'm going to put the link in the chat for those who are listening, and can't, or on the replay. It's muxharrishill.com/thriving. Sorry, I can't spell. I've just put the link in the chat. Oh, there we go. So if you open that now, then you've got it. And you will also, if you're on my mailing list, which I think some of you are, at least 2 of you, if you're on my mailing list, you will get the link and all of this information through at 8:30. If you are not on the list, in fact, I'm going to put that link. If you want to sign up for all of the stuff that I've just said and all of the information and everything like that, if you want to see testimonials as well, that's also on the link that I just put in there. If you want to sign up to my mailing list, so you can get all of the stuff, I'll put that in the chat as well. It says reading list. That's my mailing list. So if you want to make sure that you're up to date with all of the offers, and if I'm doing anything like this again, then please do sign up. And with that sign up to the reading list, it's actually an audiobook list. You will also get like a miniature, it's like a four book audiobook list that supports you with healthy relationships as well, and overcoming a lot of the habitual stuff around relational trauma. So, I'm going to stop sharing now. Are there any questions that you want to ask in the chat? Trisha says, thank you for the session. I have a question. Do you think hyper independency is attracting more unhealthy relationships? Yes. It really depends on how you do it because everyone's different. I think at the very least, being hyper independent teaches people I actually don't need that much. Like you can be in my life and I'm not really going to ask that much from you. And so we can end up in patterns with people who are like nice enough, but they're just not very available. Like, you know how we this is a hilarious and totally silly analogy, but just I work a lot in analogies. So if you think about when people buy pets, right? Cats are touted as like fairly low maintenance, like you don't need to walk them, you just feed them, you take them to the vet if they're not happy, and that's pretty much it. Okay. You've got a dog who loves you to death and wants to go out for a walk like twice a day. Otherwise they sulk and they think that you're mean. Um, and then we've got people who keep like exotic pets who I used to house sit, and one of my clients had a bearded dragon. And I used to have, and the bearded dragon would eat live crickets. So the live crickets you had to keep alive and look after as pets until you put like 10 of them in the vivarium with the bearded dragon. I was not a fan. I'm not a massive fan of creepy crawlies. And when they ran out of them, they had to order in a massive bag of live crickets and I had to empty them into the box. Anyway, and we think about those levels of investment that we have in those relationships with our pets. Okay, when we're if we're just this really aloof cat, and a lot of cats aren't aloof, but often that's the way that we often think about them. The aloof cat is like, you can feed me and pet me occasionally, but mostly I'm just not going to bother you. Like I've got my own thing going on. And even if internally we want that kind of deep intimacy and that deep closeness, if that's what we've been doing on the outs, if that's how we look and we come across as someone who's really independent and doesn't need anybody, um I think we can end up with somebody nice. We could end up getting on perfectly well with somebody who's nice, but actually they might not be. We're really teaching them that we don't need that much. There's something about allowing people to help you, even if they're going to do it badly, that's better than being hyper independent. There's something that happens and shifts because you teach people that actually you do need more. You do need to be, you know, filled up and loved, and that you are vulnerable and you do need the flow of attention and love and support to flow in your direction, not even just occasionally, but regularly, because you're a human and that's how people can love you. Think about how, if you've ever bought lunch for somebody, you're loving that person, or you're showing your appreciation, or you're looking after them. You've fed them essentially, haven't you? If you had a friend who always wanted to go out to lunch with you, but always refused for you to pay, but was quite happy to pay for you, there's just a blockage there. It's not a flow and it's not healthy. So, Patricia, I don't know if that's answered your question or if you have any more feedback. You're very welcome to unmute yourself or just type in the chat. Michelle says, can you have an assessment to say this is your attachment/personality style? You need to do this more. Yeah, there's absolutely an assessment. If you want, in fact, I do assessments. Let me put the link for my, you can come and just have an assessment with me for an hour. Michelle, I already know you, so um, I will message you afterwards. Bear with me, I'm just getting the link. If you want to book a call, this is just an assessment. It's just a chance for us to chat. So that very last link there, you can use that just to book a chat. It's an hour. We sort of go through an assessment of where you're at and where you want to be, and what we can do for you, what I think might work, what's within, and sort of how you would want to do that, or what might be appropriate for you, or what might fit what you want and what you need. So you're very, very welcome to, if you want that, then please do click on it now, because we're going to finish shortly. So any of these links that you want to at least check out, please do open them now, because once I close this meeting, you're going to lose access to them. Any more questions? Oh, you're very welcome, Jackie. Or Jacqueline, sorry, I don't know if you go by Jackie. That was really presumptuous of me. Nisha says, thanks again. Really good to refresh the content a little. Yes, you have done a lot of the work already. Highly recommend. What do you think are good grounding strategies if you're catastrophizing difficult moments in relationships, e.g., disagreements with friends? I think we would probably, I don't remember, Nisha, if we talked about, I don't know if we did loads of parts work when we did our work together, but basically, the part of you, the sort of grounding and a grounding strategy, I don't know if I'm massively a fan of those, because I think we can get to where we want to be way quicker than if we fanny around grounding. Sorry, I'm not, no, it's fine. Like, it is appropriate sometimes, but I really feel in this moment that actually, if you're catastrophizing, there's a part of you that's doing that on purpose because it's trying to save your biscuits, basically. So if you're having that moment, I would actually, especially for you, because you've already done quite a lot of this work, you've already kind of been you've done some of the inner child stuff, and the first time you do that for everyone else listening, that can be quite a big thing for your brain to do. It can be quite emotional. So if you've not done that before with anybody, it'd be probably best to do that with a professional, even if that's not me. But you have, Nisha, so I think I would actually kind of invite you to notice where that feeling is in your body and allow it to come. Maybe not in the moment with the friend, but in the middle of the disagreement. I think in the middle of a disagreement, you might be like, I don't want this to get out of control, and I don't want us to say, so maybe, say anything we're going to regret. So maybe we should kind of step away from this and kind of come back to it once we've sort of regulated or whatever. And then I would really ask that, like, identify where the feeling is in your body and ask it, um, what are you worried is going to happen? What are you making this mean? And really actually get to know that part. I think when I'm doing this stuff for myself now at this point in my journey, I write mine out like a script. So me saying blah blah blah, and then if it's anxiety, for example, then anxiety is saying blah blah blah, and it's quite organic thing. So I would actually maybe, I think you could manage that on your own, like having worked together. I think you could manage that. um, I think if you're prepared, if you're prepared to kind of speak to the part that's catastrophizing, because I don't think we did any IFS when we worked together. I think I've done that off since I last saw you. So I hope that makes sense. But no, I don't. Yeah, okay. I know. I don't think. If you want to, Nisha, email me afterwards and I will send you a podcast episode. It's not mine, it's somebody else's, and I think it would be really helpful for you to hear it. Um, Michelle says hugely recommend the child work with Harris. Gosh, very freeing when you have the moments of realization slash clarification. Thank you so much. Michelle's been working with me for I think over a year now. So yeah, anyway, thank you so much to all of you who came along. I'm going to send the replay out, and thank you so much for everyone who attended and took part and for your questions. It's been so lovely. And if you do want to come along and have an assessment, or there's no just try it out. You're so welcome. Thank you so much. I will send out the replay, and do make sure you're on my mailing list if you want the resources and the replay and all of that kind of thing. All right. Take care, everyone. I'm going to stop recording now.